College Writing 2 Proposal. The Religious Cult of Donald Trump. By Michael Chiango. On January 6, 2021, an event shocking to some, expected by others, and unprecedented since 1814 took place. The United States Capitol building was stormed by violent rioters in an attempt to overturn the legitimate results of Joe Biden's presidential win and maintain lame duck President Donald Trump in his position of power. This event was unlike any that Americans had witnessed in their lifetimes, not merely a minor insurrection, but a full-fledged treasonous attack on the nation's democracy from within. The storming of the United States Capitol was not without serious consequences, as while the lawmakers were evacuated out of the scene and none were injured, 5 people ended up dying in the Capitol raid, including 1 police officer, and 140 people were injured. Many of the rioters were charged and arrested afterwards, and thousands of social media accounts on various platforms found to be associated with election conspiracy theories and having played a part in inciting the Capitol raid, including the president's, were purged. Naturally, with tensions high and the country in the grips of extreme partisan division, people on all sides of the political aisle were looking for people and causes to blame for the historic insurrection. Donald Trump is obviously the most blameworthy figure, despite what some of his most ardent defenders will claim, as he continually lied to his supporters, claiming baseless conspiracy theories about how the election was actually rigged against him, and in his Save America rally on the morning of January 6th, he was literally quoted as saying, "If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." His second impeachment trial was entirely based around his role in inciting violence at the Capitol. However, when looking at historical or current events, it is important to consider the motivations for actions rather than just their causes. Donald Trump and his allies used lies and fear-mongering to incite a raid on the Capitol building, but that explanation tells nothing of why Trump's supporters decided to listen to him in the first place. What could have possibly been the reason that so many Americans were willing to overthrow democracy just to keep Trump in power? Some people have claimed that the Capitol rioters were racists and white supremacists. Others have claimed that they were anti-democracy fascists. Others have blamed radical gun rights activism as the guilty ideology. And others have theorized that the people who stormed the Capitol were simply desperate Americans who felt left behind by both the conservative and liberal establishment in Washington, D.C., and saw Trump as their last hope. Some people even claim that the left-wing group Antifa was secretly the instigator. While all of those explanations definitely do play a part, outside of the one about Antifa, of course, there might be one factor that many people are missing in their analysis: religion. Amidst the guns and the fascist imagery and the chanting of "Hang Mike Pence" in the crowds on January 6, there were crosses, Christian flags, and other Christian iconography everywhere, and so many people were chanting, "Trump is my president and Jesus is my savior." The religious aspect of Donald Trump's support must be taken into account when trying to explain the events of January 6th, as well as the entire Trump presidency, and a proper analysis of such is incomplete without it. President Donald Trump not only utilized religiously motivated support for him to gain the immense amount of power and influence that he did, but he has now also managed to create a new religious cult with him in the center of it. At first glance, it might not seem as though the political figure Donald Trump has much to do with the religion of Christianity. After all, the reality star president does not appear to have a strong personal relationship to the Christian faith, and he doesn't seem to be very knowledgeable about the Bible. And many people would say that he acts the exact opposite of how Jesus Christ was portrayed in the Gospels, with Jesus speaking out against the prideful and wealthy, while calling for absolute pacifism and merciful treatment of the poor and downtrodden. Yet Trump's ties with Christianity are undoubtedly present and very strong, despite all the other presidents of the 21st century appearing to have a much stronger personal relationship with God. Specifically, Donald Trump's presidency is tied to both conservative Christianity, white evangelicalism, and Christian nationalism. This is important to make clear, as more progressive branches of Christianity do not show majority support for Trump and their adherents. The kinds of Christians that Donald Trump appeals to are those who want to use governmental power to advance their own conservative religious agenda. Many people have said that when supporters of Donald Trump hear his signature slogan, "Make America Great Again," they are really hearing "Make America White Again." But it is not so hard to imagine that many of his supporters also hear him saying, "Make America Christian Again." The United States is the first ever secular nation to emerge, and the Founding Fathers, many of whom were actually deists and not followers of traditional Christianity, were explicit about building a wall of separation between church and state, as Thomas Jefferson is quoted as saying. However, there are millions of Christians in the nation who are intent on tying the identity of the nation to Christianity, and these Christians are incredibly concerned with the changes in American culture, like changing liberal attitudes towards sex and LGBTQ issues, Muslim immigration, and an increasingly secular generation of young people. In 2016, Donald Trump received 80% of the votes cast by white evangelicals, and multiple polls showed white evangelicals having the highest overall approval ratings for Donald Trump of any demographic, with over 71% still viewing his administration positively by 2019. Christian nationalism was the greatest indicator for whether or not a person voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 election, amongst different factors measured in a 2017 post-election survey with 1,501 American participants. Ironically, these Christian nationalists claim to care about godly moral values more than anyone else, yet they are so easily able to throw them away to support a twice-divorced man with a myriad of sex scandals in order to hold on to their power in the country, and their faith in Donald Trump hasn't exactly been misplaced either. While Donald Trump commonly uses dog whistles to appeal to the racist and white supremacist bloc of his supporters, he gives explicit support for Christian nationalism.
And above all else, we know this. In America, we don't worship government, we worship God.
When campaigning for the presidency, he vowed to return the country to a time of good old-fashioned values and to protect Christians from persecution. Laughably, he bragged after becoming president that people could say Merry Christmas again because of him. It has not all been merely lip service, however, on Trump's end. Members of the evangelical movement have gained an incredible amount of power under Trump. Pastor Robert Jeffers was one of many fundamentalist Christians sitting on Donald Trump's Evangelical Advisory Board, which is a great offense to secular government but a gift from Trump to the Christian nationalists. Paula White, another member of Trump's Evangelical Advisory Board, served as his spiritual advisor. Secretary of Education under Trump, Betsy DeVos, has spoken support for education reform to, quote-unquote, advance God's kingdom. Donald Trump has also successfully managed to confirm 3 conservative, religious, anti-abortion Supreme Court judges in only 4 years, which will no doubt influence future court decisions for decades to come. With all this in mind, it is not hard to see why evangelicals like Jerry Falwell Jr. regularly heaped enormous amounts of praise onto Trump all throughout his presidency. The fact that every single senator who objected to certifying the electoral vote was also an evangelical Christian is not a coincidence. Many in the conservative evangelical movement have seen the writing on the wall, with the American population becoming more secular over time, as many younger people don't feel the need to identify as part of any organized religion, and do not adopt conservative Christian values. There is a definite urgency of the evangelical Christians to conserve their power in the government, to make up for losing it in the culture war. So evangelical leaders have no problem doing anything they can to get their supporters to vote for Trump, despite his seeming lack of personal religiosity, because they know they need someone like him in power to serve their needs. When trying to analyze how Donald Trump managed to gain so much support, religious pandering cannot be left out of the equation. None of this is necessarily exclusive to Trump, however, as according to exit polls, 70 to 80% of white evangelicals voted for Republican candidates in presidential and midterm elections since 2004. Is this connection to conservative religious ideology truly a sufficient explanation to explain the events of January 6th? Would Christian nationalists and fundamentalists wanting to hold on to power really be willing to go so far as to overthrow the government to do so? If it was anyone but Trump, the answer would be no, but he is a very special case. It is worth noting that after the Capitol breach, when many of the rioters were facing negative consequences for their actions, many of them seemed to be surprised by these consequences, as though they truly did not believe they did anything wrong. For millions of people, keeping Donald Trump in office was not merely a power move to advance their own agenda. They genuinely believed, and many still believe, the former president's lies about the election being stolen and America being destroyed if Joe Biden became president, because they have been indoctrinated into a new religious cult without knowing it. What makes Donald Trump different from and arguably more dangerous than past presidents is the fact that he has been using cult-like rhetoric from the beginning to influence his followers, and it has only gotten more extreme as time has gone on. And cults, when confronted with the realities of the world, can often end in catastrophic ways. That is precisely what happened on January 6th. Trump's rhetoric and policies may come into conflict with many of the things taught by Jesus in the Bible, but there are actually some startling similarities between Trumpism and Christianity. In the Bible, God portrays himself as the absolute authority who can never be questioned, telling his followers that those who disbelieve in him are liars and evil people that must be fought against, and that is needed, and all that is needed to be wise is trust in him. For the wisdom of the world is foolishness in God. For it is written, He taketh the wise in their own craftiness. 1 Corinthians 3:19. Trump, along with many of his supporters, has used similar rhetoric, portraying himself as an absolute authority on what is true, never once acknowledging that he is wrong about anything, and saying that those who question him are liars and cheats who are destroying the country. Instead of worldly wisdom, it is the fake news media that is foolishness merely for the fact that it criticizes him, and Donald Trump catches the SJWs and the liberal elites in their craftiness and brings them down. While Trump saying that the United States needs to build a wall to keep immigrants out is a far cry from Jesus, who said to let the immigrants stay in your house, Trump's narcissism, pettiness, and authoritarian impulses are right in line with Yahweh's. Many people, non-religious, moderates, and fundamentalists alike, have pointed out how treating Donald Trump like he is some kind of savior who can do no wrong is blasphemous towards God and a form of idolatry. However, it must be taken into account that buying into dogmatic praise and worship of the Almighty Father could prime religious people to gravitate towards a cult-like figure such as Donald Trump. Is it that difficult to see how fundamentalist Christians could come to see Donald Trump as some sort of benevolent savior from God, when their religion has already primed them to buy into a savior narrative? Studies have shown that if someone buys into one conspiracy, they are more likely to buy into another, and QAnon appears to be a mutation of religious software with the similar claims to many widespread Christian narratives about there being a plot by the devil to seize control, but one day there will come a day of reckoning when the followers of this plot will be destroyed by a savior who will return to establish dominance, with everything being part of some grand plan. Trump is the savior and Q is the prophet. People wonder how such a large portion of the American electorate could buy into the baseless idea that the election was stolen from Donald Trump, but it really shouldn't come as a surprise at all, considering that only 1/3 of Americans believe in the empirical reality of evolution through natural selection. Logical fallacies such as dogmatism, might makes right, pathos, and alternative truth are constantly utilized in Christian apologetics, and are also used in defending Trump's actions, coincidentally. All Donald Trump had to do to get his loyal followers to have faith in him was to pronounce his version of the truth and never let up on it.
There's a lot of talk now in liberal quarters about how Republicans should tell their base, who still believe the election was rigged, that they need to grow up and move on and stop asking the rest of us to respect their mass delusion. And of course, it is a mass delusion. But the inconvenient truth here is that if you accord religious faith the kind of exalted respect we do here in America, you've already lost the argument that mass delusion is bad.
This, of course, is not to say that all Christians, or even the majority, were so inclined to buy into Trumpism, especially if one disagreed with Trump's political stances beforehand. But it simply must be grappled with that the Bible is an inherently anti-skeptical book that encourages blind faith as a virtue, which served to be incredibly useful to Trump as he was forming his dedicated religious cult of global zealots around him. Now, it is only a matter of seeing whether Trumpism will have any staying power or will fade into history like the thousands of other religions of old.